Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe Yanez and I, we have a special guest today, Garrett Gunderson. Now, Garrett and I, we first met, at like a mastermind, like years and years ago. And I've been following his content. We've been diving into a lot of stuff that he's been talking about for years. He's a best-selling author, and I would call him a financial guru. But before we started recording, we started talking about your kids, and this is a topic that Gabe and I are very interested in. So Garrett has a 17 and 20-year-old boys. We're talking about how they want to get jacked, and which is a topic of conversation this podcast a lot. Garrett, I have a 14 and an 11-year-old, a girl and a boy, and Gabe has two kids, very young. But I wanted to kind of dive into what you were talking about, which was that your older son kind of, for lack of a better term, took the quote unquote non-traditional route, which some would argue is actually the traditional route if you look like many years ago, and is working with you. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit before we talk about money and helping a bunch of guys on this show get really wealthy.
Yeah, my oldest son had auditory processing issues growing up, so school was kind of tough on him. And we actually had his IQ tested, and it was so high that they retested him. So sometimes that created like a lopsidedness, right? And so school just sounded like death to him. So what he wanted to do was something else. So I said, look, your school can be, I have a book coming out. Why don't you go on book tour with me? I was speaking 1 to 2 times a week over 90 days. He would show up, attend the entrepreneurial events, sit in the crowd, get to like take notes, get up and speak here and there. He's been editing my videos. So it's a temporary path, but I'm like, you got a 4-year deal where you can work this way. And then what's going to be next for you and where you want to go after that. But I've heard him quote my books before now, which feels super good. You know, we get to spend time working out together several times a week, which I just love hanging out with him, and he's a good kid, you know, so I'm cool with him not going to school.
I just, so my son, I see him either A, playing sports in college, or B, getting right into the business side, because he showed a lot of interest in that even at a young age. Where my daughter, she has interest in more of like the medical side, so her path will probably be more, schooling. But I think it's really great for us to break down this idea that like every kid is different and there's no perfect like one way, right? Like your son, I bet you is getting so much out of traveling with you, learning from you, that maybe instead of taking on debt from college, now he's building wealth outside of college. So that's awesome, man. 50%
I appreciate that. Of what he earns right now and put it into Bitcoin, which I think is pretty fascinating, right? 50% of what he earns. And, I'm like, cool, that can help you get ahead. It gives us conversations. And just my younger son was going to prom last week, and he wanted to take my truck. So I'm like, all right, let's drive it around, make sure you can park this thing. It's a little longer than your Bronco. And the whole time he's asking me questions about finance. Dad, what's a bond? How does the stock market work? Like, where do you invest? Why do you invest there? And it's like, those magical moments are great. I just took longer of a drive to keep that conversation going. I came home, I was just lit up telling my wife about it. I'm like, yeah, it's my jam,
How do you, just because you brought it up, but how do you get your kids to be inspired by something? So obviously this is your world, right?
Yeah.
And what do you think got them to ask you those questions? What do you think you've done to create curiosity and not animosity? Like, I didn't mean to create that as like a tagline. I'm just asking,
that was good, man. Yeah, that was a great tagline. Well, my wife really taught me this. She goes, sometimes when it's with kids, you just have to be around and listen. It's not when you're ready to have the conversation, it's when they're ready. And so she'll just like take them on drives and sit there quiet until they start speaking up. So when we go on trips, like our cabin's an hour away. We'll a lot of times have conversations on the way to the cabin. We'll have our weekly family meetings. Sometimes it's in the hot tub. Sometimes it's here in the office. But we just, we joke around. We just talk about what we do to support each other. We just try to carve out some of those times. But when we travel, like when we take our longer trips, they almost always want to have bigger conversations then. And I realize when they're ready, I'm ready for it. But sometimes if I'm just the one initiating it, they just hear like blah, 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 right? It's not the right time for it. And they're like, all right, this is just one of Dad's rants. But I think also watching me live, like both of them want a 6-pack because they saw me at 46 years old get shredded. And they're like, yeah, we want that. So they're eating differently. They're working out differently. They see the kind of lifestyle that we have. And they're like, how did you create this? We want to figure it out. So I think leading by example is the ultimate way. Like I work out with my son 4 times a week. My other son decided he wanted to get really dialed in when we went on a trip to Austin, and we were the only ones in the gym. So I took my shirt off, and at 46, he saw all the veins popping out. He's like, bro, you got ab veins? And it was like, I could see it clicked in his head. Like, how did you do that? I'm like, those are made in the kitchen, bro. Those are made in the kitchen, you know?
That's awesome.
So good. So good. Garrett, I'm super fired up for this conversation. This is something that I kind of suggested. Well, we were talking about this idea of provide, and I was like, man, like we need to have someone that can give us like the real like tactical stuff. And because I feel like it's one of those areas, kind of like fitness, kind of like nutrition, where there's so much advice. There's so much like, this is what you should be doing. This is what you should avoid at all costs. This is, how you should look at it. Here's a mindset shift here that I hope you can kind of help dispel some of that. But first question that I had, because it's kind of what prompted wanting to have you on the podcast is, what does provide mean to you? Train, protect, provide is a big part of our brand and what we're trying to kind of like put out there as a meaningful message for men specifically. What does kind of that word mean to you? And maybe more specifically, what role do you think that plays for men specifically?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a couple different pieces to provide, right? I want to provide safety and stability to my wife financially. And so I had to ask her what that looks like. What does safety and stability look like to you? Because I'm a person that always wants to try something new. I mean, Jason, I don't even know if you know, a couple years ago, I did a comedy special on Amazon Prime. I was just like, you know what? I want to take all the stuff I know about finance and apply it to comedy. Now, my wife was supportive only because I knew what provide meant to her. I knew that she wanted a certain amount of money in savings, and it's not just in a regular savings account, but it's in my cash value. She wanted to make sure that we would provide the same type of lifestyle for our kids, which I was able to do through cash flow. But to me, purpose is a key category of providing. When people don't have purpose and they provide, there's a level of resentment, there's a loss of energy, there's a sense of trading time for money. And so I think that the biggest thing is, how do we discover who we are and find the ways to consistently create more and more value with that? That's the ultimate way to provide, because it's an example, it's more exciting, but it also can check those boxes of, my wife feels like we're in a great place.
Just on that note, real quick, when you said the first part of provide for you is safety and security, but having the conversation with your wife of what that means to her. We haven't discussed it like that. And that's a cool element, right? Because I might have my own perception of what safety and security is financially, right? Hey, you want to have a house or whatever, but she might have a totally different one. And so that's a great first step, is having, so did you just have that conversation with her? You like set up time? Because I know you also talked about the family meeting, which I'm familiar with, especially from, I'm familiar with it. I want to talk more about that. But in regards to your wife in particular, how did that look like?
So we actually went on a date, and we went to this restaurant that we love. And I just wrote down questions that I asked her throughout the entire dinner. What is about money that's important to you? What was your first memory of money? Was it good or bad? What are the things that are worth going all in on? What would we be willing to spend more money on because it's worth it? What things do you think are wasteful? What big things would you like to have in the future when it comes to money? I just really got to a sense of like what money meant to her. And when I understood what safety and stability looked like, it was so easy to provide, a lot easier than I expected. I mean, it was a certain amount of money that might be intimidating to other people, but as a percentage of my income, it was only like 1 year's salary or 1 year's income in a safe account. And I was like, cool, we can check that off. And now she can support me when I have a big idea, or I'm going to make a major change, or I'm going to sell my business. Like, she feels like, okay, I know that we're okay. We're going to eat the food that we want. We're going to travel to where we want to go. We're going to live in the type of home that we want. And that's not at risk taking that next step.
Gary, what's the advice there on even taking a step back and broaching that subject? Because I feel like one thing that, I can definitely speak to, like, there's always some resistance and there's an uncomfortable nature to talking about money in a meaningful way. Like, it almost feels unromantic if you can put a word to it. Like, even the way you describe that, like, completely makes sense, and clearly it's been powerful and super useful for you guys. And I've started implementing with my wife. Like, we have like a big meeting every year where we literally like sit down and for like 5-6 hours go over everything. But money and financial goals and actually putting numbers to that has been a big part of it. And it's honestly helped us like really grow together and get on the same page about stuff. So I can do nothing but speak to the power of what you're talking about. But I know a lot of people can hear that stuff and like, hey, like I had questions written down and almost the formality of it. And it feels, like I said, like unromantic. Like what how do you address that maybe?
So the simplest way is I created this thing called the money persona quiz. And if you could just get your spouse to take a money persona quiz, you'll find out when they're in scarcity, how they operate, and when they're in abundance, how they operate. And then when you take it, what you're going to find is you probably don't have the same money persona as them, which can seemingly create conflict, but it actually is a gift, because then they're going to be strong at the things that you're not, and you're going to be as strong at the things that they're not, if you can come from a place of co-creation and if you can come from a place of collaboration. Most people, especially providers, come from isolation. Imagine that you're trying to, grow a business or grow something, and all of a sudden you hit a cash flow crunch. Most men, especially, don't want to tell their wife about that. And what they do is they think, I'm just going to work harder to get through this. But then the wife's like, why are you distant? Why are you at work all the time? Because there's a productivity conundrum. We're trying to provide, but we actually create a divide because we don't have that communication, because there's different money personas. So if you could just understand the money persona, the way I look at it is, I used to think that I was the gas and she was the brakes. And now I'm like, no, she's the guardrails so that I can accelerate without getting off track. And then she kind of fact finds things for us. And then I actually find a way to finance it, make it happen, and do those things. But now we haven't fought about money since 2008. And it's really about the money persona. Just understand that. And people could I'm happy to give them the quiz if they want to DM me, and they could just take it for free. Just Garrett B. Gunderson, and we'll hook them up.
Yeah, we'll put that in the podcast show notes. This has been already very helpful, because I agree with you. For example, owning a company, there are times where cash flow, one of the things that my wife and I have had to talk about is like, she's like, hey, the kids and I can like feel when the energy's off. And a lot of times because you feel stressed about cash flow, or you feel stressed about this. And, it's like, how do you communicate that better, where there could be a sense of like understanding? And I think going back to your quiz could be a great step even for my relationship. So thank you.
Yeah, man. I mean, I get it's tough. Like, especially, look, when I was dating my wife, I'm like a romantic. I'm like the best. And then as soon as we're married, she's like, wait, you just work all the time? Because I felt like, oh, now I have to provide. And my way of thinking to provide was just to work harder. But sometimes the harder we work, the less likely we collaborate, the less likely we have rejuvenation, or the less likely we have creativity, because we get exhausted. I especially saw this when I had my business partners. They died in a plane crash. And for 4 months, I did nothing but get up first thing in the morning and go to work. I wasn't working out. I would come home and crash at night after eating crappy food because I didn't, feel myself properly. And I gained 20 some pounds over that 4 months, and I couldn't make the simplest decision. It wasn't until my wife was like, hey, you're a pretty extraordinary businessman, but you're just an ordinary husband and father. And I was like, damn, and it was like that moment that I was like, wait, I've got to do this differently. And the crazy thing is, I started an office from home for 30 days. And by doing that, when my wife and son would fall asleep because they'd take naps during the day, I wrote a book. And by writing a book, I was able to do so much more with less effort. I was able to reach so many more people. So I thought that hard work was the way, but it actually was limiting, because I wasn't allowing other people to support me. I wasn't growing a team. I was too busy trying to handle everything on my own, at the expense of my family, at the expense of my energy, at the expense of my health.
That's a crazy story about your business partners dying in a plane crash. You don't hear that every day.
Yeah, they were 35 and I was in my 20s, and just naive and immature. I thought, I got to do all it takes to keep our 42 employees, and we're not going to lay anyone off. And I'll be back on we had a radio show that was 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. I was back on it on Monday. They died on a Friday. I just was like exhausted. And if it wasn't for my wife calling me out, it would have been a major problem, because I started to work out after that 4 months when I was at home. I started to, I just felt like this different level of energy because I was taking care of myself, because I was with my family. I didn't have guilt and shame working every single moment, feeling like I should be with my family, but confused about how to let other people step up and do their job. Like, I think that the transformation I've had in the last few years is I'm all about growing people instead of just growing myself. For a long time, it was all self-actualization and how do I get better? And now it's like, I look at you, you got these guys coming to work out. It's like you're growing people. And the more you grow people, the more you can actually achieve yourself, and the more time you have for other things, because you don't have to do everything on your own.
You've talked about your wife quite a bit so far, and Gabe and I, we talk about, we're both very fortunate to have had pretty long lasting relationships. My wife and I met at 15. And I'm wondering what role that plays in how you're guiding your sons in that discussion. So with the 20-year-old and 17-year-old, you're ahead of me, right? So I'm trying to get whatever cheat codes I can from you right now. How do you lead from the front for your sons in terms of who they look for as a spouse? And what does that have to do with your wife, right? Like, how does that work? What in particular do you and your wife do to maintain your relationship? And then what in particular do you do intentionally to show your sons what to look for in a spouse?
I have this like vision as a husband to be a premier romantic and an extraordinary husband. So when my kids see how I treat my wife, it's like I just treat her really well. And because she makes me feel like I could dream big, and if I don't even achieve that dream, that she's not going to judge me. She just likes that I go for it. They see this dynamic of like a loving couple. And, it wasn't always that way. Like when I'm telling you, when my partners died, I mean, I had 2 years where I was pretty much like not that available as a husband and kind of numbed out. Fortunately, the kids were really small, so they didn't watch that example. But they watched that we do date nights and that we go on trips together. And, we take care of each other, and I feel really supported and seen by her. And so I think that the kids get to see that example. And I felt like my wife's parents, I lived with them for a little while when we were dating. She lived 3.5 hours away, and I had a townhome. So she moved in there and I moved in with her parents because I was starting a business. And I got to watch, they have a great relationship. They've been married for over 50 years. My parents have been married for a long time. And so I think that it's helpful to have those examples in our life. And a lot of people don't have that example. So I feel really fortunate. But I do think the kids, when they look at it, they see marriage as a good thing. And they see how happy that we are together, and, how supportive we are of each other. And she's an amazing mom. Like she's cooking for him because our house manager's out with surgery. And she's like, why are you having doing macros? She has to cook like 5 hours a day, measuring food and all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, hey, because the Gunderson boys are all going to have 6-packs. That's the bottom line. But everything from date night to our regular meetings, to the notes that I write her, to the way that I treat her, I think I'm setting a good example to the kids.
Where on that note, one thing that I thought was really interesting, we had a previous guest on, Nick Freitas, and he was the first one that kind of brought this up. And he had this take of when he does have, and he wouldn't call them arguments, but just passionate discussions, times where you guys don't agree. What's kind of your take there with setting an example to your sons about doing that kind of stuff in front of them versus like keeping those conversations to where it is just you and your wife? Because his take was, I always do it in front of my kids because I want them to know that even when we are in disagreement and whatever, I'm going to do it in a way that's completely respectful for my wife, but I want them to know that that can happen, but it doesn't change the fact that like, we're always going to be there for each other. We burn the boats and we're staying. Where do you kind of fall on like, is there any conversations that are had completely behind closed doors? I mean, I'm sure there are.
Yeah, the ones behind closed doors, like if it was about sex or something, that's probably a good one for my wife and I have behind closed doors, although we have a sick sense of humor in my family, so we'll joke about all that kind of stuff, and we talk about all that, in front of our kids. But the reality is, like, I do like that if we do have an argument, it is in front of the kids so they could see that. I remember when they were little, once I came home, I was having a really bad day, and my wife told me she had a bad day, and I was like, you don't even know what a bad day is. And I was just an ass, right? And like, I kind of like got after her, she got after me, and like really just a couple minutes in, because it wasn't going to a good place. I said, I just walked out, I drove around the block, I came back in, I go, hey, can I have a do-over? Like, can I just say that I just walked in and this is the first time I walked in today and we could just start over? And we don't ask for a do-over often, but by asking for a do-over, it's like it breaks down the wall of bringing that argument up again. And the kids, while I was going around the block, were really worried. And my wife was like, hey, this is what happens in a marriage. You have tough conversations. This is how you work things out sometimes, And so fortunately, we're not yelling at each other and calling each other names, but we're definitely raising voices, And I think that's okay to do in front of the kids. And then she has a good conversation. I have a good conversation with them afterwards. And then they see that we're in a good place afterwards, we probably ask for like a do-over once or twice a year, but when we do, it's crazy. Like I immediately go, all right. Like I could be at the most intense frustrated. She just said something to trigger me. And I'm like, she's like, can I have a do-over? I'm like, Yeah. And then we just find it's crazy. So if we overused it, it probably wouldn't work anymore. But, that's super helpful.
I love that.
I want to just dive into a little bit about your family meetings.
Yeah.
I can't remember who's the author. There's an author that wrote the book about it. I can't remember. I'm blanking on the author about the book about the family meetings. But how do you guys do them? It sounds like you do them on a regular basis. And what benefit have they given your family?
By the way, we would talk about these family meetings. So one day we decided to go to my database and let them watch one of our family meetings, right? So, and most people think, oh, this is going to be so formal. So the kids don't realize there's hundreds of people watching this family meeting. They know that someone's watching because there's a camera on us. But we're like, my wife's late because she's talking to a contractor. So she's like 5, 6, 7 minutes late. The kids and I are just joking around. But we got what we wanted to get done in the hour, which is, what are you working on this week? What's a new skill that you're trying to develop? How am I doing as a dad on a scale of 1 to 10? How could I do better? Is there anything that we want to do together coming up? Is there a concert? Is there something like that? It's just, and look, I'm happy to give people my agenda. We can put that in the show notes too. And I have like 3 interviews where people interview my wife and I on marriage, because I really turned around my marriage from year 7 to 9. And then we've had this great relationship. We're going on year 23. But we have the agendas in there. We have our quarterly agendas. But if people get those downloads, don't try to do everything on the agenda. It's overkill. Just take small pieces of it. The one that I always do in the family meeting is, how am I doing on a scale 1 to 10 as a husband? And how am I doing as a father? And, that's what I'm asking my kids. And a lot of times I have to kind of get it out of them. Like, what can we do to be closer? How could I better support you? And look, when my son was like 15 and 16, it was just give him more time with his friends. Now he's coming back around, and we're going to spend a little bit more time together. The 20-year-old, he's cool to hang out anytime I want to hang out, and come to the gym and work out. And I just tease these kids relentlessly as the comedian that I am. So, and what's really cool is you can hire your kids if you're a business owner, and it's tax deductible to the business and then tax-free to them. But I love to hire them for things that are really like out there. Like my son opened for me in my comedy special. My other son helped me to rehearse for my theatrical keynote and one-man show and got paid for that kind of stuff. Those are really bonding experiences. And so sometimes in those family meetings, we're talking about ways that they want to earn money, and I make them come up with ideas, and they have to invoice me versus paying them for chores. Chores are just part of living under the roof. It's kind of the pay the rent is do the work. They're not going to get, I'm not a socialist just giving them cash for nothing. They've got to earn it. And a lot of times they bid jobs really bad. They overbid, they underbid. If they underbid, I definitely say yes. And then they're like, oh crap, I'm doing way too much work for this. And that's how they learn their lessons, So the family meeting is just a way to have conversation and communicate. It's become less formal as time's gone on. In the early days, it was a lot more formal than it is now.
Less formal, but a non-negotiable, right? So like less formal, but it seems like it's something that everyone knows and has come to expect, that it's done, and it's done weekly, and it's not missed.
Yep. We're cool with it being in the hot tub now. Sometimes we're cool with it being on the drive to the cabin. Sometimes in the past it was always in this office, and and things like that. So yeah, it's just less formal, but we want the time together. What has been hard is our youngest now has a job and going to school and wants to make the golf team. It's a little harder to do family dinners that we used to do, and so we kind of miss that. So the meeting is instrumental. And like for Mother's Day, for Easter, all we did was we did our meeting on the drive to my family's house and the drive to my wife's family's house, because we had a bunch of time that day, and that's the day we'd normally do a meeting. So we try to make it convenient but committed.
Okay. I wanted to ask about, on a personal note. So if you're talking about paying the kids, so do they set up their own companies and then they're invoicing you, and then so is that the way they're doing it? Do they have their own companies set up now?
We don't have them set up a company. We just have them set up a bank account, of which, when my kids were under 18, I'm the one that's on the bank account, and then I pay into that account. And then there's some things that they can take and, spend money however they want. And then there's other things that we kind of got a plan of where the money would go. So it's kind of a mix. And yeah, they might eventually have a company, but I haven't seen the need to do that just yet.
You said that your son puts in 50% to Bitcoin. So talking a little bit more about money, Why Bitcoin? I mean, Bitcoin's like at, I don't know, it's probably around like 85 right now, maybe. I could be wrong. I haven't looked in the last couple of days. What do you think about cryptocurrency?
I think most of it's garbage and it's not going to exist in the future. I think most of it's just nothing. I think that there's going to be a few things that are real. And, it's kind of like in the 1999 era when everything was like .com and there's internet stocks. And, a few of those companies made it through and they're the biggest companies we have today, but most of them don't exist anymore. And that's kind of how I feel about cryptocurrency. And it's a big difference between like Bitcoin and like, other things like these meme coins or even like Ethereum. Like I like the way that my son got into it was this. Like I was buying this house and I wanted to take him to the bank to show him how a wire worked. And 42 minutes in line, I had to eventually leave and get him to school. I mean, I was at the front of the line talking to the woman, but she had to get permission to send this wire. And I was going to show him how easy a wire was. Well, it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. So I then brought him to the house and I said, let me show you how fast I can move Bitcoin. And I showed it happen like in 15 minutes, right? I open it up, send it, and then it appears 15 minutes later. He's like, that's cool. So I started talking to him about like centralized banking and how everything in the banking system they do I got pretty deep with them. Quantitative easing, where they're just adding money to the economy. It's all kind of closed door. We don't know how much money is actually transacting. There's more money being borrowed and spent, and every dollar is being kind of lent out more than once through something called fractionalized banking. And I said, this is why inflation exists, and this is why if you just leave your money in cash each year, it's going to be worth a little bit less. And he's like, well, what are the alternatives? So he actually started to study Bitcoin on his own. I said, hey, you should look at this guy, Michael Saylor. Hey, you should follow recommendations from my buddy Ross that does a lot with it. And then all of a sudden he just started to study it, and he would come to me and he's like, I think I want to start putting money into Bitcoin. So as he did that, we had more and more conversations before he increased the amount that was going there. And so for me, the fact that it was decentralized, that it's, deflationary instead of inflationary, and that he doesn't need it anytime soon because it's going to be really volatile, I just like that it brought him into that conversation and he's willing to do some of the research. Now, my youngest son got into it because one of his friend's dad is super into Bitcoin, and his friends started to put money in Bitcoin. So he came to me and he said, I know Breck's putting money into Bitcoin. Could I start doing that? So I bought him a wallet and I started showing him how to do it. And then he just got competitive with his friends. So he's just trying to put more and more money into Bitcoin at this point, even though he spends a lot more than his older brother. So I just like that there is a chance for that to go up exponentially in value, where anything else they would probably do, they don't have enough cash to get into real estate necessarily. They don't, and so it's just an easy way to start having a conversation around money.
Man, it's a good competition for them to get into. How much can you start investing early?
So talking purely about money, right? You're a dad out there. You're listening to the show. You have 2 kids. You make money. You make pretty good money, all things considered, but maybe don't have as much as you want in savings. Maybe don't have a very diversified portfolio, because a lot of that portfolio is probably in stocks and bonds, and which is what is the recommendation? Where do you start when it comes to money?
All right, so I'm going to give you 2 different frameworks here. The first one is if you want to accelerate your wealth, the first goal I always look at is how do you make more money? And how do you make more money is by investing more in yourself and the exponential skill sets that matter. Financial intelligence, sales, marketing, communication, those kind of things. Like always look to grow yourself if you want to grow your money. The second is learn how to keep more of the money you make without cutting back. So there's 4 I's to efficiency, and I'm using like USA terms here. The first I is the IRS. Most people tip the government. And if they just simply get some financial savvy, they can pay less in tax and put more money in their pocket. The second is interest. A lot of people don't have the right knowledge to lower their interest that they're paying on things. There's 3 main R's to lower your interest. One is you want to restructure your loans. I see people with a paid off car and then a credit card that has a balance on it. You could always refinance that car at a much lower interest rate because there's collateral and it's an amortized loan, versus having a credit card and all of a sudden you're going to boost your credit score and you're going to save interest, right? So that would be an example of restructuring. Reallocation would be the second R. I see people all the time that have money they're paying 10, 11, 12% on the money, but they're only earning 4 or 5% on their cash. I'm like, why not pay off that loan? It's a guaranteed savings and improvement of cash flow. And the last R is renegotiate. Simply, if you have a credit card and you have a good credit score, which is 760 or above, if especially if you have collateral, like I mentioned, a car or a home, or if you have good cash flow reporting, or even the right connections, what I find is a lot of people could even just call their credit card company and say, I'm thinking about doing a balance transfer or canceling. They'll move to the retention department and they can lower their interest rates. So either renegotiate, reallocate, or refinance. Those 3 R's can help with interest, and this is a substantial amount of money. The third I is investments. A lot of people have non-performing fees. They have hidden commissions. They have drag against their investments, and it makes a huge difference. So if I earn 9.2% over 30 years on 100 grand, it grows to 1.4 million. But if I earn 10%, it grows to 1.74 million. That's $340,000 more dollars for less than 1% because of compounded interest, right? And there's also compounding costs. Now, the fourth I is simply insurance. A lot of people have improper structure or inefficient structures, and the simplest thing to do is only insure catastrophic things, not inconsequential things. Some things inconsequential if I could pay cash for it today and go to sleep tonight. And the first dollars we pay for insurance are the most expensive dollars. So deductibles, elimination periods for disability. If we can increase those, we can increase our coverage or lower our premium payment. So those 4 I's, which is IRS, interest, investments, and insurance, those 4 I's right there, if we can just simply plug financial leaks, people can keep 10% or more of what they make without having to cut back. And so that alone helps people get further ahead without having to sacrifice their lifestyle, right? And I think that that's the problem, is if everybody's always in a budgetary mindset, you can't shrink your way to wealth. What you have to do is become more efficient, pay yourself first, and then become a better investor over time.
I'll go ahead, Gabe, and then I have a question. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, the one thing that I really appreciate in doing a little bit of research about some of the things you talk about, and then you just mentioned it now, is this whole not having the scarcity mindset of budgeting. I like a lot of what Dave Ramsey puts out, and he's been very helpful in getting out of debt. And a big thing is similar to what you were saying, like just the fact that kills your cash flow and that's so important. It's been like a huge mindset shift for him. But I know that he's very big on everything needs a budget and you need to live way below your means. And to your point, that does mean cutting out certain things. He's very big on if you're eating out, it's entertainment, it's unnecessary. And I think he goes a little bit too far on that side. So I do really appreciate the fact that you should be trying to do these things without necessarily cutting back and trying to find ways to increase what's coming in instead of necessarily being super stringent about what's going out.
Yeah. So think of this way. We all hear, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was going to ask a question about insurance, but yeah, I want to hear about this. So
just to, kind of finalize what Gabe's saying here. We all have heard the statement, live within your means. Now, when I say live within your means, what do you think about doing?
Cutting back?
Yeah, cutting back, right? So that's only one way to live within our means. And if you're spending more than you make, Dave's right. You got to cut back, right? If you're spending more than you make. But the 2 other ways to live within your means are to be more efficient within your means, which was the 4 I's, IRS, interest, investments, insurance, or expand your means, reach more people, solve bigger problems, right? Add more value. And so sometimes if we're in this myopic view of just reductionist thinking, we stop thinking about production. And so what could you do to contribute to the bottom line if you work for a business? Or if you're your own business, how can you grow that by investing in your team or investing in yourself or creating more value for your customers? And so I just want people to always think about expanding their means, being efficient within their means, and only going to reducing how much they spend if they're reckless or they don't have a way to be efficient or expand. So Dave's right for the people that are reckless, but for everyone else, there's these other 2 opportunities.
No, I love it. It reminds me of rich dad, poor dad, right? The poor dad says, we can't afford that. Rich dad says, how can we afford that?
Yeah, totally.
Let me ask you a question about the insurance, because that was, obviously IRS, especially as a business owner, that's something I pay a lot of attention to. And the other things you were just referring to, especially if you had a lot of debt, I think is key. But let me ask you about insurance. So, obviously for us, some insurance just come to mind. Keyman, life insurance, obviously home insurance, health insurance. Those are just a few. Car insurance. Those are just a few that come to mind.
Home, liability, disability, medical, life, business owner policies, all that kind of stuff, right?
So what is the recommendation that there's an opportunity potentially to Is the recommendation to have those things, but have the highest deductible possible, or is it not to even have those things?
Yeah, I want to have those things because I want to transfer the catastrophic risks. So, for example, I met with this woman, Glenda, and she had like car insurance, homeowners insurance, and no umbrella policy. And it was with two different companies. So I was like, well, what if we just pick one of these two companies so you get a multi-policy discount? And she's like, okay. And I'm like, she had $100 deductibles on her car and her home. I'm like, look, if you got an offender bender that was $500, would you make a claim? She's like, no. I'm like, good, because if you made a claim, they would just raise your rates likely. So what if we raised your deductibles? How much are you comfortable? She decided $1,000 deductible for her car and her home. And I said, and then let's take the savings and let's buy an umbrella policy. So what we did was we were able to save her $1,050 by combining the policies with the same company, raising the deductibles. And then we took 300 of the 1,050 and bought $1 million umbrella. And what ended up happening is she had $700,000 more coverage for $900 more exposure, because now she had to come out of pocket for $900 more if there was a major claim. But if there wasn't, she saved that $700 a year. So every 14, 15 months, she's already ahead. And we got her $700,000 more liability coverage. So that was insuring the catastrophic, not the inconsequential. So I think it's important to have these things. And some people go, oh, well, I'll have enough wealth in the future, I don't want insurance. But my book, What Would the Rockefellers Do, might be kind of the definitive topic on insurance. And I'm happy to give the audiobook to everybody as a gift for watching your show. But in that, I'm talking about there's a certain type of insurance that helps so that you can actually do the Rockefeller method, which is helping you perpetuate wealth for generations and not actually have to use the banking system in the future. You could finance things for your future generations, earning interest rather than paying it. And by doing that, you can actually have a good savings account that out-earns a regular savings account and not have to pay taxes on it and access to your money along the way. So the right type of insurance matters for sure, and the right design of insurance.
Okay. So you talked about the eyes.
Yeah.
What else? So I could wrap my head 100% around that. I think that's an easy place to start. I get it. But now let's just say you had some additional, let's just say you had a couple $1,000s a month. You wanted to make some strategic investments. What does that look like to you? Does that look like property? Does it look like Bitcoin? Does it look like stocks and bonds? What do you think?
So the first thing that we would analyze is what I call cost of money. Your cost of money is the highest, best sustainable return you can get with investing, or it's the highest rate you're paying to borrow money. So what you have to think about is you're always paying interest, whether you pay cash or whether you borrow. When you pay cash, you forfeit the right to earn interest. When you borrow, you pay someone else interest. So if someone's like, my house is at 2.75%, but I could go put money in treasuries right today at like 5 or 6. So it actually slow this process down, paying extra to the mortgage. So it's better for me to kind of invest that. So once I understand someone's kind of cost of money, I can give them better information. The second thing is I want to discover their investor DNA. Your investor DNA is your values, which is kind of the script for how you operate. It's your competencies. There's certain things like in health, you're going to know a lot of stuff. In fitness, you're going to know a ton of stuff. In media, like there's certain things that you're going to have competency in. And then your drivers. Where do you have interest? Where do you have passion? Where do you want to learn? And what I want to do is show you how to become a better investor by picking a lane of the types of investments that make sense for you and then protecting that. So some people are good at real estate. Some people aren't. Some people are amazing at business. Other people aren't. Some people are amazing with intellectual property. Other people aren't. So what I want to do is help people discover that investor DNA and then match that against their cost of money to determine whether they should pay something off or whether they should invest. And once they do, protecting the downside and being part of their due diligence team. So I have no money in the stock market. I don't feel like the stock market is something that speaks to me. Most of the companies are not companies that I enjoy or love utilizing. I love mostly small business. And I look at my own vision and my own companies. I don't even own a lot of real estate because I've written 10 books. Each book is like a piece of real estate to me. And I do what I can to put that out in the world because it's a piece of who I am. I love writing. I love contributing it. I love doing these podcasts. And so I want to double down my investments there versus in companies I know very little about, that I have very little control over, and that I'm at the whim of whatever happens in the economy. When the economy changes, like right now, people think the economy's tough. We're having the best month we've ever had in our business since we started. Part of it's because I'm in influence of the value creation. I'm not just handing it off and hoping for the best. I'm actually building something that I have direct influence over, I have a degree of control with. So I know that's different than how most people would teach investing. I think that if you don't know much about Bitcoin, it's a terrible investment for you. If you're amazing at one type of real estate, that might be a good investment for you and terrible for someone else. I guess, Jason, the way I'd say it is risk isn't in the investment, it's in the investor. And a lot of people make risky investments because they know nothing about what they're doing and they just hope for the best. And I call that speculation and gambling. The world has called it investing, and I'm here to help people discern the difference.
Pulling on that thread, Garrett, I'm curious then, what's your take on the like general advice of if you don't feel like you're competent in any of those areas, or I feel like also the average person just doesn't have the time, or maybe that's just a mindset issue of like diving in and like educating themselves on one of these areas. So then you take everything that you have that's extra and you do just tie it to an index fund, and it traces the S&P and that over time, if it's long enough time frame, doesn't seem to lose. Like, is that something that still works for some people? Like, or
if they're not going to do the work, that's probably a better thing to do an index fund than something else. But I look at it this way. There's people out there that say they don't have time to work out. That's just a lie that they're telling themselves. The reason we say we don't have time for money and finance is because we feel intimidated by it. And because we feel intimidated by it, it's easier to say we don't have the time while we're watching Netflix. It's easier to say we don't have the time while we're doing a number of things that don't really matter. But I think that if you're not going to create financial intelligence, you're going to pay the price over time. If you're not willing to do the work, an index fund might be the best place for you to go. Reading What Would the Rockefellers Do and do the simple strategy with cash value might be a place to go, and you don't need to worry about all the rest. That's fine. I'm willing to be more active. And the people that are going to be more active now will create more passive income later. The people that are more passive today will always have to be active in the future to try to create income, because most people that have retirement plans, they don't know how to create cash flow with those. So when they finally retire, they're like, okay, now I've got to provide a retirement off something that never created cash flow for 30 years because it's stuck in a qualified plan like a 401k. So I think that we do have time for it. We just need enough leadership. And we need to stop succumbing to the lowest common denominator, saying that we don't have the time or that we don't have the money. It doesn't take money to make money. It takes relationship and ideas, value and exchange. You don't have to know everything you think you know about money. You just have to get good at a couple things that you're willing to focus on. Build your foundation, automatically save, deliberately invest, plug the leaks. And if you just go index funds and cash value insurance, you're going to be much better off than the people that are speculating in things they know nothing about and end up losing a bunch of times along the way.
I mean that really speaks to me and us, because I mean that's a perfect analogy, right? Like, so many people tell us don't have time to work out, like don't have time to make the right nutrition choices, and we, because we live in that world, like understand that that's not necessarily true. So then let me just ask really quick, selfishly for me, because I think I definitely fall in that bucket of like I don't want to be like worried about this stuff, and every time I felt like I've tried to dive in, it does just seem overwhelming, and there's so much different. Like I'll look at like 10 different things, tell me to do 10 different things. So it's like, all right, I'm just putting everything to follow the S&P and I don't want to worry about it. Where would you start then to start being more active and educated, or at least figure out what your potential area could be that you could do better in and be more active in?
I mean, the best thing is I could hook you up with a financial health assessment, and that's going to tell you where you're set and where you're not set, because without awareness, it's hard to have any progress. That'll create the awareness, and then you can prioritize it from there. Look, for people that are entrepreneurs, we do deep dive discoveries, complimentary. And in that 45-minute session, we find out what's working, what's not working, and where they can plug leaks and where they can create more cash flow. Then we do a report of findings. And whether they hire us or not, they now actually have a game plan that's based upon who they are, not based upon a product we sell, because we're not out there selling products. I'm not selling mutual funds. I'm not selling insurance. I'm not meeting with clients one-on-one. I'm here to be an educator, to treat finance like people treat the gym. If you go to the gym frequently, like imagine if someone went to work out with Jason for the first time, they see what he squats, or they see what he deadlifts, or they see what he cleans, and they try to do that the first time in the gym. It will collapse them. When we start to compare ourselves to people that are financially literate and think that we should be at that level from day one, it creates risk, because we're going to not be able to be stewards. You just take small steps, but if you just start looking at, you need to be in the financial gym once a week, and it'll get you financially independent within 7 years, Is it worth going to that financial gym once a week? I host a financial gym every Wednesday, and I teach people how to make more money, keep the money, or grow themselves, because I'm dedicated to cutting through this crap of people saying, I don't know where to start, because I get it. There's so many people that are so addicted to the products they sell that a lot of people feel like, is this really the right thing for me? So I had to give up all my licenses. I had to cut out all my renewals. I had to give up all that kind of stuff years ago to say, I'm going to be a voice to help be a leader in this space so that people don't treat this as something that they just relegate and hope for the best, and someday they become a steward and they build that financial strength over time. So it's what I'm here for. My mission is to liberate 1 million people to become financially independent so they can change their family's financial future and create a legacy that lasts. I think that people have access to a legacy, but they think it's only for the ultra wealthy, and then therefore they don't even try. And like, just because you can't be a champion at CrossFit doesn't mean that you shouldn't work out, right? Just because your legacy might look different than someone else's doesn't mean that you don't take those steps. And you just got to start small. If you take on too much too early, it will be crippling. You'll be sore. You're like, I hate money. I hate finance. I'm just going to hand it off to everybody else. But nobody, if I could delegate working out, there's days I would do it. But I just have to do the hard things, and life gets easier, because the stronger I am, the more I have the energy throughout the day. The weaker I am, the more I have the excuse that I can't work out. And I'm just tired of people being in a place where they don't feel empowered around their finances. I'm passionate as hell about this. I'm here to be a stand for that. And you don't need to do this alone. I've got free tools. I'm putting more information out all the time. I've written books that can help guide. But if people want one-on-one support, then we're also happy to help there. But I'm not doing it just for that. I want to really be an impactful financial teacher on this planet, especially for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear. It's clear that you have a passion for finance, like I do for fitness, and I know Gabe does too. Because you look, of course, there's business built into a lot of these things, but at the end of the day, man, it's like you want to see a lot of people be successful. I want to watch millions of men get super fit and capable through our programs and our community. It's very important to me because I believe they're going to be able to show up the best they can as husbands, as fathers, for their family, and for their legacy for the future. Generational changes, I believe, can occur through fitness. I do. I also believe the same thing through the finance side. I do. And I think that they're very similar. Now that you're talking about it, I see the same, because there's a big barrier to entry on both of them. They're both pretty intimidating if you haven't had exposure. Coming from a guy who, I have some exposure from a finance side and whatever, but not nearly as much, obviously, as you. It can be intimidating. Even listening to this podcast, some people are hearing you talk about these different things. Some people might have no idea what half of them are, right? And it's like that in itself could be a great place to start.
Yeah. Again, if I walk in and see you do muscle ups like it was nothing. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, dude, I've tried muscle ups. There's something, but you just make it look so easy, and it's like, but that took work. It didn't start like that from day one, and you have the form and you learn the efficiency. The same thing happens with money. If you just take that first step of paying yourself first, the second step of plugging your financial leaks, the third step of investing in your skill sets and building your team, the fourth step of discovering your investor DNA, the fifth step of eliminating all the distractions and so that you just focus on what matters most, the next step of becoming financially independent where you create enough recurring revenue from assets to cover your expenses. Then what you've got is so much freedom and choice in your life, but we have to heal our money relationship. We have to understand our money mindset dictates a lot of the flaws and falsehoods and misinformation and myths because we think, A, it's too hard. B, we don't have the time. See, like all these kind of things, we can go down the list, but the reality is that's just a story we've been told that we bought into. And it's the belief in that story that has limited our ability and strength financially. I mean, I think that it's harder to become physically strong than financially strong. When I see people are physically strong, they don't go once a week or twice a week. They're going 5-6 times a week. They're doing high intensity training. They're doing all this stuff. The way that they eat matters. Like you can spend less time on your finance and get bigger results. We just believe it's overly complicated because nobody told us what to do. And the people that did have too much interest on a transaction to actually have our best interests at heart.
That's another question. I'm just going to keep rattling off questions here because this is awesome. Another thing that I know that you talk about a lot is 401ks and IRAs and just kind of like challenging the traditional idea for retirement. And one book that had a huge impact on me kind of in this world was Die with Zero. And, that talks a lot about this idea that, we've been sold that we need to save and save and save for this future where we're not going to be able to enjoy that money as much. Like, it's going to be so down the road that it seems silly to keep saving for a time where we can kind of enjoy it now. What's kind of your take there, which I'm sure you agree, and how does that very specifically relate to, traditional retirement accounts and the purpose that they serve?
So I look at the 401k as I look at the food pyramid. It's an antiquated, false model. Think about it. You put money in a 401k, it's not yours. It's now FBO, for benefit of you. There's no cash flow along the way. They tell you it's saving tax, but it's just delaying tax, not saving. Saving means you pay less. Delaying means you don't pay right now, but you have to pay in the future. It's often fueled and governed primarily by the stock market that people don't have a lot of control or knowledge in. There's a myriad of problems. And there's too many people funding that before they've increased their education, their skill sets, their value creation, or paid off their loans. So it just became this thing that now it's like a big brother thing too. When you go work for someone, they automatically enroll you. You have to opt out. And by the way, the reason they even exist in the first place is because companies used to provide pensions. And then when they couldn't provide pensions anymore, they put the onus on the employee to say, oh, you should do a 401k, we'll match. But guess what? The average balance in there is like $170,000. There's only 1% of people that have $1 million or more in a 401k or IRA or type of plan like that. And so the reality is it's not doing enough to help people retire. And we have to question retirement in the first place. What if you create a life you don't want to retire from? What if you stop doing the things you hate along the way, start delegating those, and build the life that you want to continue and just enjoy life now, not just in the future? Because look, our kids spend 93% of the time with us while they're under our roof. And we're going to spend all this time working so that when they're not under our roof and we're too old to enjoy the money, we're finally going to enjoy it. We don't flip a switch one day and stop being scarce and be abundant. If people become miserable millionaires by becoming misers and never spending their money and just working and toiling in the trenches, they never change. And that indoctrination actually destroys wealth. I believe wealth is our ability to be fulfilled, our ability to be present, and our ability to be happy. And if we don't have those three things, because we're chasing net worth in some retirement plan at the expense of our family, our fitness, and having fun along the way, we lose. And that's unfortunately where too many people are stuck. That's why I rally against a budgeting mindset, because life design matters, energy matters. And if all of our energy goes towards scrimping, saving, sacrificing, delaying, and deferring, and setting money aside and doing everything on our own so we don't have to hire other people, then guess what happens? We create a miserable life, and even though we might have millions of dollars, we never enjoy it. And then when we die, our kids just blow it because we don't even have the conversation around the table. And when I say we, I'm talking about all the people that get it too indoctrinated in the Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, millionaire next door mindsets that yes, you could become a millionaire, but you're still living like a pauper. So why does it matter? If you can't be generous with your time and your money, you're not wealthy. If you don't know how to enjoy the process along the way, no amount of net worth will matter. And if we lock all of our money up for a rainy day in a 401k, then what happens is we're at the whim of a market, and inflation, tax fluctuations, or interest rate fluctuations can confiscate our wealth in a moment's notice, just like we watched happen in 2022 and what we've been witnessing in the last few months right here today. I want people to start becoming value creators, invest in themselves, design a life that they love, and show up in a way that they can create enough value because they're not so miserly thinking, hey, how can I have deep pockets and short hands? And that they're always looking for everybody to foot the bill because they've been taught erroneously that life's about what you can cut out instead of what you can create.
Gabe,
it's just so powerful to have someone challenge so much of this stuff because, and I know I'm not alone in this, like my parents, first generation immigrants, I'm actually an immigrant. I wasn't born here. And for us growing up, it was like, it was like, keep the cash under your mattress type of mentality. And it was like deeply, in like, that's how I grew up. That's what I was told. It was like, hey, save. Like, don't even invest. Like, even that don't do. Like, it's just like literally save. And, in many ways, it was a survival mechanism for times that were very uncertain for, I'm assuming, a lot of families, but it is very important to break out of that. And I think that a lot of what you're saying is super powerful and resonating with me. But, I know why this can feel so challenging to how we've been just, raised, a lot of us.
Playing devil's advocate just for a second. I don't even know if I'm dude, I agree with everything you're saying. But like, how much is too much though? So let's just say, at what point does it become irresponsible? So, as I've gotten older, You know, I'll give you a perfect example. When COVID hit, we had 30 locations. And dude, I mean, we lost more money than I could possibly explain, right? You can only imagine.
Right.
And I have 2 kids and a wife that we have to support. So at what point, how do you balance this idea of like, you know, you got to invest in yourself, educate yourself, add more value, like all this stuff I totally agree with.
Yep.
And then at the same time, how do you keep, I guess maybe it goes full circle back to the conversation with your wife about
that's
what.
Exactly, dude, that's exactly it. It goes full circle to go right back and say, what does safety and stability look like to you?
Well, I'm mind blown right now.
You just brought it in such a good way, man. Dude, I was literally on the same wavelength that you. Like, we're going right back to the opening conversation,
dude. So that's what security and safety is to me, right?
Yeah.
Or as a family. And if you have that, then after essentially once you've confirmed what that provide is for your wife and for yourself, then bro, it's just investing in yourself, creating vehicles, and dude, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
I was telling my wife, you know, I have these mentors, and they mentored a guy that was a billionaire. They've mentored a few, and they said that he's lived in the same home for 30 years. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, all right, the next layer, what we do, if we make more money, can we lock in our lifestyle here and not have it creep up? Because we kind of have, I'm like, what else do we need? What else do we want? I'm like, the only thing is I would like to fly private for the convenience of it, but I don't really want to fly private for the cost of it, right? So even if there was a lot more money, that's still a tough choice for me that I'm not sure I do. But otherwise, we kind of have everything that we want and need, which means if she feels safe and secure and provided for, I could really dive into my vision even more and reinvest at an accelerated rate to add more value, to serve in a deeper capacity, right? But if we start seeing that money come in and we start thinking, oh, well, let's do this, this, and this. So what I've been saying is, what's worth it for us? What do we want to go all in on? We like really nice hotels. We like trips to Europe. Great, let's go all in. But you know what? I was like, should I get a new truck? I've been driving the same truck since 2018, but I love it more. I had a Bentley, dude. I didn't even care about the Bentley. I love my truck. And I'm like, I don't need a new one because I love this one. So I think some of it is, it's so valuable to know what we don't want. Because if we are uncertain, people will sell us on what we want, but we may not even want it. If you don't have a plan for your life, someone else will sell you theirs, and you don't know if that's really what you want. And so if we can kind of go, all right, babe, what's safe and stable for you? What is it that really matters to you? If that's provided for and this grows, do we really need more? Or can we actually just give more? Could we give more to the organizations that we love, even the organizations that we're involved in? Could we give more to, this vision? And the answer is yes. But if I didn't have safety and stability, then the insatiable appetite of a business will always find an excuse to deploy money. 31 locations instead of 30, 34. It's like, to what end? To what end? Is it worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it actually creating a better life for me and those that I serve? Or is it simply a vanity metric and an ego thing that I'm going through? And look, I think it's fine. I want to be the most impactful financial teacher for entrepreneurs on the planet. I want to have the most influential financial book of all time with What Would the Rockefellers Do? That means I'm going to keep investing in for that to happen. But why does that matter? Well, why it matters is I feel super fulfilled when someone reads something and tells me the impact it makes. I feel pretty amazing when I'm walking through an airport and someone approaches me and my son gets to watch a conversation that someone has with me because I put words on a piece of paper that actually changed their belief or their philosophy and led to a better life. When I bought real estate back in the day and had renters, I never meant the renters. I never meant anything to the renters. It just was like something to get money. So now I'm like, I'm not going to buy more real estate because that's not my investor DNA. I'm going to write more books, and I'm going to put those books in people's hands because it actually builds a relationship. And relationships are what really make me feel rich more than anything else. Quality relationships, beginning with my wife, my kids, my parents, my in-laws, and then extended out into my tribe and into the people that maybe I never even meet, but a video impacts them because I was on this interview with you guys today. And, so we have to define those parameters of wealth. Otherwise, it's insatiable.
Garrett, I am so glad that Gabe and I were having a conversation. We're like, hey, we talk about provide in terms of like financial, but mainly what we talk about is like experiences. We think it's really important that men—
It's mainly what you talk about.
What I talk about is that men should have the fitness to always be able to go do stuff with their kids. Like my son, and I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir, like, dude, every day, let's go do this, let's go do that. And I want to be able to have the fitness. But we were talking about the money side. And I think that this conversation has totally exceeded anything that I had in mind, because you're talking about a framework and a mindset shift. And I think that is where the first place to start. It's just like trying to get someone in better shape. Like, you could tell them a workout, but really what they need to do is understand the why, understand the vision, understand what success looks like. And then you can start, picking at it. So in regards to resources, I've heard you mention a few things, right? Your Rockefeller book, you've brought up now a few times. You were talking about a quiz as well. And so we want to make sure we put all of that in the podcast show notes. So I'll reach out to you afterwards and make sure we get everything listed out. Because I think there's just too much value not to have it.
Yeah, and those will all be free. I'm going to contribute them for free. People aren't going to have to buy those. I'll give the financial health assessment so they could go through a checklist, the money persona quiz that I really recommend you have your kids take it, your spouse take it, anyone that's important in your life, because it's going to tell you a lot about how they operate. And then the Rockefeller audiobook. So Rockefeller, those, happy to contribute those things. And yeah, I mean, dude, what you've done in fitness, people could do in finances. It's just that you know your why. And most people with finances don't know enough about why it would be important. But for me, I'm really clear. It's because I want to leave a legacy that lasts. And I don't want my kids to inherit money, but I also don't want them to be reliant on a system that can dictate what they'll give to them or not based upon a situation outside of their control. So I'd rather my kids pay interest to our family bank rather than have them pay interest to another bank. I'd rather have them start where they could borrow money to start a business and doesn't take 6 months to get it. Maybe it takes 30 days and they could teach their other heirs about it as well. So the Rockefeller book talks a lot about that. And sometimes I think I put too much pressure on myself with that, because like my great grandfather had to leave his wife who was pregnant for 7 years to get enough money to put food on the table and get a house for them, and meets his daughter at 7 years old. That's pretty extreme by not having your money handled. So I'm like, I don't want my family to go through that pain, but I also don't want anyone just to get an inheritance. I want them to get opportunity, not money. It's like my son asked me one day, "Hey, Dad, are we rich?" I'm like, well, shit, son. I don't know about you, I am, but that's yet to be determined, you know what I'm saying? And I guess if we define rich as relationships and memories and fitness, then, which I do think that part of being wealthy is financial, but it's also health.
Of course.
Anyone that doesn't have their health is going to waste so much money trying to get their health back. And look, I don't know, anytime I'm in a hospital, I feel uninspired and scared. It's just like I look around, I'm like, this isn't a good place to be. I don't want to have any future there. My great-grandma died, or my grandma died, when I went to her funeral, a lot of my uncles just aren't in good shape. And I was like, dude, I'm so motivated to be in ridiculous shape. And in 2023, I got diagnosed with kidney disease. And so I just was like, man, that's not a good situation. And I was like, what am I going to do? I got to deal with stress differently. I went through some biofeedback stuff, and I just changed my diet. And right now, my last blood work, they're like, they can't tell I have kidney disease. They can't, they're like, this doesn't happen. But a lot of it's the genetic wealth that my money, that my mindset habits, my health habits and money habits all impact everything. And I'm thinking about genetic wealth. I want to pass on those habits to my kids and my grandkids and anyone else, that they could be hard workers, but they can be a good husband, that they could take care of themselves in the gym and still be okay financially. I want them to think that they can have it all, not think that they have to sacrifice one thing for another. And I think that we've been weakened in our mind to think we don't have the time or money for things. People use that as an excuse. I don't have the money. I see people with millions of dollars tell me they don't have money to pay 10 grand to hire my firm. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have the money? I could see it in your 401k. Oh, that's my 401k. I'm like, well, look, if we save you $40,000 in tax, that'll probably be more than your 401k earns for several years. Are you sure you don't want to take it from there? I'm like, oh yeah, that does make sense, but it's like compartmentalized. Or when people say they don't have time to take care of their health, I'm like, if you don't take care of it now, you'll be taking care of it later, and it'll be in the worst of ways. I'd rather do some burpees today than be thrown up in a hospital. So when I'm sitting there going like, I got a Tabata burpee round that I got to do here, I'm like, I just keep doing it because I'm like, this burpee is better than the alternative, right? I'm a fit, energetic machine. I'm gonna do what it takes, and I got my health because of it. And I just, hopefully other people feel inspired to do that with their finances. Look, when my son had some issues, I was like, babe, I'll find the money to figure out how to solve this. She goes, I'll do the research. And we got him to a place where he's stellar. We didn't know all the details. We didn't know everything to do, but we asked different questions. We looked for mentors. We looked for people that could guide us. And the same thing can happen in your finances. You just have to commit to it. Look, and I think that when people say they're committed to stuff, most of the time they aren't. There's a big difference between interest and commitment. If interest is like if I called my wife and said, hey, babe, I'm here speaking in Vegas. I just want you to know that I'm 80% committed to our relationship. She'd slap me through the phone, right? Like she'd come down there and kick my ass. Because you're either 100% committed or you're interested. And when it comes to fitness, I'm 100% committed. From the food that I eat, to the going to the gym, whether I feel like it or not, to whether I hop into that cold plunge, to whether I take a walk with my wife, I'm committed to it. My feelings don't matter in the moment. My feeling of what I'm going for overall is what governs me. Same thing with my finances. I don't love looking at spreadsheets. I don't love dealing with contracts and agreements, but any time I don't do that, it costs me. So I make sure to be a steward instead of sloppy, and hopefully I've inspired people to take a look at their finances, have the courage to do it, give some good resources to get you on the right track. And if you're committed to it, you will get the results, even if you don't know how right now. People will show up for you because it's a different conversation.
I love it.
Garrett, I really want to thank you. You know, the reason I made the comment before when Jason said that we talk a lot about providing experiences, you know, the conversation that we had was, you know, that's what provide means to Jay. And I think that that's an important piece. Like, I think I fall more on the traditional sense of, I do think that providing financially for us as men is huge. And I think it's actually primary. And I think that it should be something that we all, as men, as husbands, as fathers, are taking incredibly seriously. And that doesn't mean that you have to be the bread earner of your family. That doesn't mean that. And I think what you've done with this podcast is given the opportunity for a lot of men, even if you're not the one that's earning the most, to educate yourself and still be the one that's leading to make smart financial decisions. Because again, you know, and Jason might not agree with me, I think that the financial piece of provide is the most important. I think the experience thing is good, but like, you can't provide those experiences regardless of your health if you don't have the financial safety and stability to do so. So I appreciate all the time and a lot of the information.
Yeah, man. And Jason, when we worked out together years ago, I think it was 2017. We were up at first, we were up at 10,000 feet at this event. Then we went down and worked out at like 7,000 feet where my cabin is. So I had this advantage over all those people that were like coming from sea level. And so I had a good workout. But dude, I still remember you showed me 3 things that I still have impact me in the gym every day that I work out and utilize those things. And so if you have the right person that shows you, like, I respected you, I knew who you were, I saw it, you know, and it was like, yeah, man, like, I know if I need to get a bunch of calories and crush someone on the rower, I know how for short bursts, how to just dial it in because you showed me what to do, right? I know, like, you know, I know how to do a little bit more kipping than I did before because you showed me the mistakes that I was making. Like, if you're willing to take feedback, I think the reason corporate America is kind of messed up at times, and I think the reason most people don't get ahead is they're unwilling to take feedback. But when I look at Jason, I know he's an expert. I saw his feedback as love and helping me. Some people see it as critiquing that they did something wrong. Stop worrying about what you're doing wrong and find people that can help you to do more of what's right. And that's absolutely going to game change for everybody. Most people are embarrassed about their finances. I should be further along. I shouldn't have made this mistake. I'm in finance. I've made some mistakes I'm embarrassed about. I invested in an NFT that I lost all the money in it because I got to write a song with Stevie Aoki. It was a stupid idea. I should have never done it. But the thing is, I made a mistake and I'm going to own up to it, and I'm going to make sure to teach other people not to make the same stupid mistake that I made. But I did it because my son was into music, so there was some good purpose there. But, you know, like, Jason, so thanks for, you know, what you taught me back in those days, and I was just excited to be on with you guys today. Like, it's good energy.
Dude, I love it, man. My camera keeps going back and forth. But Garrett, I really appreciate you. Dude, this has been a great conversation. We'll put all the links to the podcast or to all the different things you're talking about into the podcast show notes. And for everybody listening right now, right? Garrett has, you know, obviously he's very engaging, very inspirational. I think he shared a lot of good information. Use the podcast show notes. Dude, they're free resources he's given up to help all of us. I know I'm going to look at those and share this podcast with at least 2 friends. Be like, look, dude, I listened to this podcast. It was specifically about finance, and it opened my mind in these ways. I know I'm going to share this as soon as it's released with multiple people, and we'd really appreciate if you do the same thing. Because the goal of this podcast is to level men up, to take us to the next step. And we talk a lot about fitness, but this one was about finance, and I think it was, and lifestyle, and this was great. So Garrett, appreciate you. Gabe, it's always good to see you. And we'll see you guys next time for another awesome episode. Keep training hard.